They scrambled down into the pass, their thickly calloused bare feet ignoring the bite of the rocks and stones, their swords and spears held high. If they didn't have swords or spears to carry, they would wield sticks and clubs. Some were armed with rifles, but these were often old, practically relics. Their saving grace was the fact that they took a variety of cartridges. The buffalo hide shields would do nothing to stop bullets, but they would block the bayonets slammed forward by the fierce Askaris, native soldiers brown like themselves, born like themselves in the Horn of Africa, but now serving a colonial master. Unlike the Askaris, most of the Ethiopians wore the traditional shama, a toga-like garment that their ancestors had donned for generations. You could have painted the whole scene in oils like a war mural hung in London's National Gallery or preserved in a sepia photograph until the tanks rolled in. This was not a page out of the Book of Empire from the 18th and 19th centuries. This was December 1935. At first, the more ignorant warriors took these strange, lumbering metal things for monsters and ran. But one of them, fearless and proud, circled around and jumped onto a tank, pounding on its tin shell casing. Machine guns were blazing away and slicing men in half, and still the Ethiopians swarmed and flooded their numbers into the narrow gorge of what is called Dembagina Pass, overwhelming the enemy. When it was finally dusk, the men and their brilliant commander, Imru, would slip away with 50 captured machine guns. Miles away, beyond the frontier with Sudan, beyond Egypt and Libya and across the Mediterranean, the original strongman of Europe sat behind the desk in his cavernous office in Rome and fumed, his eyebrows knit in frustration below his stolid dome. Benito Mussolini was furious. This was not how his grand campaign was supposed to go. It wasn't so much that the Ethiopians were winning, so far overall they weren't, but they were not clearly losing, and the world watched and was amazed at the defiant courage of savages. Hadn't his armies practically strolled into enemy territory, easily taking towns in the north? And when his general in charge had vacillated, hadn't he moved to act, replacing the old codger with his army's chief of staff? But still the war was not a continuous triumph he longed for. A month before, a skirmish at a place called Enda Georges had made headlines around the world because the Ethiopians had gotten the upper hand there too. They were not supposed to do well. They were only supposed to fight and bleed and die and let the glorious new Roman Empire be born. But a tiny man of 5'4", as self-contained as Mussolini was wildly expansive, said no. His warriors were only fighting now because it was a last resort, and he would not break his faith in God and the assertion that men of noble stature should keep their word and play by the rules. African monarchs had said no before and been ignored. But this king had such presence of dignity, such gentle eloquence, that he could not be so easily dismissed. He said no. But more importantly, most of the world was listening and for the very first time was also saying no. In London, outraged liberals tangled with Oswald Mosley's black shirts, who naturally supported the invasion. Demonstrators in Toulouse, France, attacked a group of Italian sailors who wanted to go home to serve. Down in Accra, the capital of British-held Gold Coast, about 500 black citizens want to sign up to go fight for Ethiopia. In Cape Town, in South Africa, 6,000 black citizens turned up at a government office wanting the same to fight for distant comrades. Muslim Arabs in French and Spanish Morocco put together a small mercenary army intent on crossing the Sahara and winding their way along the Upper Nile to go fight. Sympathetic communists wreaked havoc in Mexico City, brawling with police armed with rifles. The Ethiopia crisis could be felt as far away as South America and even touched Asia. The news was everywhere, inescapable. The word was going out that Haile Selassie's soldiers would not simply roll over and accept the inevitable. In America, support was arguably at its highest. On a hot afternoon back in August, an estimated 20,000 people had poured into the streets of New York's Harlem neighborhood for the cause. Many of those in the throng had taken to calling themselves African in a remarkable show of black power before the term had even been coined. Here were African Americans marching in age of barefoot children going to school, a time of whites-only drinking fountains and back entrances at hotels, long before Black Panthers and the Pride of Roots, before Marley and Mandela.